In the first game, I am yellow player. I determined that no matter what, I can only choose 2 opening tickets rather than 3 if I want to be able to focus on just blocking. I know that if I want to win, I'm gonna have to at least complete my 2 opening tickets so I don't lose a staggering amount of points. I choose Duluth to El Paso and Dallas to New York. Not too far spread out, but I am going to have to do some stretching if I'm going to be able to get these cities connected. In my incursion to win the game by blocking, I myself get blocked, ironically enough. This prompts me to start building from my most remote city on my tickets, so that way I have those railroads claimed. I start gathering cards and using my turns to begin building from New York City to both Duluth and El Paso, even though looking back, I probably should have just started building towards either one of them and then building to the other. Regardless, I do manage to get all 4 cities among both of my tickets all connected, and I can now focus more so on blocking my opponents. I begin noticing patterns in when they build, and I take this into account whenever I begin to gather cards to begin building blocking railroads. However, the very first thing that I do though is build in the same direction that purple was building towards whenever his railroad ended, just after Oklahoma City, between Oklahoma City and Santa Fe. I then see a similar opportunity to block green in a similar way between Dallas and Houston. That move would go to waste, as green had long since been prepared to build between El Paso and Houston. I then see green begin building in a separate area, and so then I immediately start building ahead of him, because perhaps he was planning on continuing to build in that same direction. Purple then starts building in yet another separate area, and you can probably guess what happens next. Yes, I try to block him there. I think that you are starting to get the point now, so skipping ahead a little bit. To summarize things, I see purple beginning to build in the New England area, so I start setting up some railroads over in the New England area, and I tried my best to clog up the stretch of colorless railroads that goes from Dallas to Duluth, as well as choking off any attempts purple may have had been planning on to build northward from Los Angeles or El Paso. I did not foresee green building all the way through the United States Midwest, so I didn't do any blocking there. And then the moment of truth finally arrived. My strategy to win was to frustrate my opponent's attempts at trying to complete their tickets. I do believe that some of my blocking and some unintentional blocking by that of the green player did frustrate purple's attempts at trying to complete 2 tickets that involved cities along the Atlantic coast. However though, purple did complete 1 monstrous ticket that ran all the way from Los Angeles to New England. As for green, he was able to just zigzag around me like a snake. I think that he would have been able to complete all of his tickets with or without me trying to block. Purple and I were tied for having the longest railroad, so we both scored 10 points. Ultimately though, I would come in 2nd place. Purple, who I had done the most blocking to that game, would come in last. Not that I was intentionally trying to target purple, but I just could not predict where green was going to build towards that game. Game 2, I am yellow player again, and immediately I am caught between a rock and a hard place. None of my opening starting tickets are being cooperative in complementing the strategy that I'm using, trying to complete the tickets first and then proceed to block my opponents. I end up choosing the 2 tickets that both have Miami as a city. Miami is difficult to build from because it's so remote and the roads that lead to it are long. As I am gathering the cards to begin building my quite long journey between my ticketed cities, I see that my opponents are beginning to build in the Seattle and Vancouver area, an area that is very easy to clog up. And being as how early in the game it is, I decide to risk it. I do my best to seal off the roads that lead between Seattle, Calgary, and Vancouver. And with that move, I have effectively screwed over anybody who was trying to build into those areas. Will such a move pay off, though, is what I continuously wonder as I play through the game. I ultimately get my comeuppance. I am forced to have to abandon my original plan of building through the southern United States after my opponents claim those roads, and I am forced to have to instead start building through the central United States. My risk did not pay off. The end of the game approached, and I had neither enough cards in hand to build the railroads that I needed, nor the number of turns left in the game to complete them. I then tried to build just some sort of railroad somewhere that I can, just so I can get a few more points on the board. And then the game ends. I discover that there was only really one ticket from one player that I think that I was able to intentionally block. All of the other tickets that the players failed to complete were more so haphazardly blocked by either other players or myself, but just not intentionally. That game, I did pretty much just nothing, and I did not complete any of my tickets. I came in dead last. It's then from this point forward that I decide I will complete my tickets first, no matter what. It wasn't until I was editing this that I saw that I actually did complete one ticket, but I'm too lazy to go back and re-record. Game 3, yellow player, yet again. This time I get some tickets that are actually pretty good. I can just go in a straight line. Downside of getting a group of tickets that encourage going in a straight line is that it's easier to get blocked as opposed to getting tickets that encourage kind of going in a C shape or a curve. It's just generally more difficult to correctly plan in the event of getting blocked whenever you get a group of tickets like this. I'm pretty sure that this is the third game in a row that my tickets involve me going from New York to Los Angeles. And so I take quite a few turns gathering the cards and placing the railroads accordingly. Nothing different than you might see just from any other game of Ticket to Ride. And so eventually I do finish it all. Bad news is I'm having to start from scratch because whenever I place my last railroad to complete my tickets, I have no hand left. I then see that green has a series of railroads, one north and one south, with a gap between Duluth and Omaha. Want to take a guess what I do? That's right, I place one right there. This will not necessarily block green, as he can place another railroad right next to mine because it is a 4-player game. However though, it does at least force his hand a little bit. I am kind of hoping that someone else tries to build on that spot. It is against the rules for me to try to build one next to it. Green then builds one next to it. What a waste of a turn, cards, and what a waste of an explanation of my actions. Despite that, I knew that it was likely he was going to build there anyway. The idea was that we would both together clog off that railroad from other players. I'm not so much intentionally targeting green. I just so happen to be able to accumulate cards that are able to block green in this particular instance. So I see another railroad of his on the northwest side of the United States, so I set up another shop there. I then see green starting to build towards Toronto, and so I manage in time to place a railroad right in front of Toronto where he was trying to build. Green then takes a rather protracted amount of time during his following turn. Call it king-making or harassment, but green did have the highest score of the game by quite a margin. The other railroads that I did build were more so just to try to squeeze out a few more points before the game ended, not so much about blocking. Dead last yet again, even though there was one ticket that I do think I was able to intentionally stop. Green was able to eventually build to Toronto, and I did not affect anybody else. Or at least, if I did, it was not intentional. At this point, I think you know my opening game drill. Both of my tickets are along the East Coast. We finally get to take a break from Los Angeles. Oh, and I'm yellow player yet again. So after I finish off my tickets, I then start to clog up the one train long railroads that are across the USA, because I am not so sure of a place that I want to spend way too many resources into trying to block just yet. I feel a dose of deja vu whenever I see some players building around Toronto. Red player begins to build around the barrier that I made in front of Toronto, similar to the previous game. And so I start to collect pink cards in attempts at trying to hold off Toronto against red player. Turns out Red was not actually building toward Toronto. Red ends up building elsewhere, South United States. I then use those pink cards to instead try to block him over there. However, soon enough, Red would manage to build around my blockade. Several turns pass after that, with me really not being able to do much other than trying to gather cards in attempts at trying to do something. I do manage to build a railroad in the central United States that appears as though it's trying to be used by Green. However, Green would also build around that blockade. It was almost as if he had been planning to not use that railroad. I see Red trying to connect some of his trains, so I jump on that. And for some reason that I don't recall, I build another railroad elsewhere, somewhere else, instead of what would have been a better idea, which would have been blocking him right here. Honestly, I don't remember. Perhaps the reasoning was that I'm not 100% sure if he was going to continue building and he has to take two different turns to build on either of those railroads that would have connected him. And I suppose the reasoning was that I should maybe wait until he builds on one so that then I could jump on the other. And that was also potentially stopping up Purple. Just kidding, Purple would soon afterwards build right around it. Or right next to it, that is. It is after I see Red placing a train car between Dallas and Houston that I then place my blocking train cars between Dallas and Little Rock. Red then attempts to build around my last blockade. However, I'm right there to attempt to stop him too. I say attempt, because all I can do is just hope that he does not have two more cards in hand to be able to build right next to my blockade. Uh-oh, I jinxed it. He was able to eventually build to Dallas. I at least was able to slow him down from being able to do other stuff. And that was all that I did that game. I did not mention it earlier, but I did build a railroad from out of Los Angeles, and it impeded Purple's progress, and it ultimately frustrated one of his tickets that he was not able to complete that came from out of Los Angeles. Now here's what's pretty amazing. There are several tickets that Green did not complete. However, though, I actually doubt that my blocking had anything to do with him not being able to complete those tickets. I think the unintentional blocking by the other players stopped it. And this was a pretty close game. Red would be tied with Purple by score. However, though, Red would be tied with somebody else, I believe Green, for the longest railroad. So then Red would score 10 more points, and Red would be the winner. Whereas for me, I'm dead last. Again. by a margin that's quite huge. So I think the main takeaway from this, no, blocking is not effective. It is much more effective in Ticket to Ride if you use your cards and turns to progress towards completing your own tickets, and not so much to frustrate and impede your opponent's progress. ToxicWIldHog, out.